Hey, welcome to Leadership Within, the moment for leaders to reflect on their human experience of leadership. I'm your host, TK, and I'm joined by
Vanessa.
Hey, Vanessa. Great to see you today.
Yeah, lovely to be with you again.
And our wonderful viewers, too. Thank you for joining us for this wonderful episode, because today I've got, as always, hopefully a topic that you might find interesting, which is, let me, as always, start with the story. I think everyone that is a leader and has a role which is about leadership had this moment when they had to transition their mindset from just being like, as Americans say, individual contributor or just a member of the team to suddenly starting to think like a leader. And I'm wondering, Vanessa, what's your story? How do you remember your moment when that happened for you?
Oh, it's interesting, isn't it? Because you kind of assume that there's a definitive moment where that
Mm,
happened. And I'm not sure that has ever been true for me. Um, I think it's something that I have to balance. So the part of me that wants to achieve and, you know, create in the world, my individual contribution needs to be balanced when I'm working with a team, in a team. So I think it's a repeated series of kind of choices for me. Like, am I in an I or
mm.
or am I in a we mentality? So I'm not sure that I have one definitive moment. It's
I have
probably
a
not what you were
moment, yeah.
expecting me to
Well,
say.
no, not necessarily, right? Because the I don't think it's just the one moment when it just clicks. But for me, there was a moment when I've actually noticed that something needs to change, and I remember clearly because I was on a train on a conference call, and we were starting something new, and I was. Not necessarily just yet put in a position of leadership for a team, but that was the moment when it started gathering steam and a team would soon arrive. So what happened is, as we were in this moment when we were gathering the information, preparing the documents, planning and so on, my bosses at the time were talking, okay, well, this needs to get done. And I was saying, this needs to get done and so on. And then I said, full of energy, yeah, all right, no worries. I'll get it done this week and so on. I have a plan for that. And my boss said, well, yeah, TK, but it might be better if you actually delegate. We have these people that will be working with you and you don't have to do it yourself. You might want to get your talents to help them get this done while you might be helping in this area. And at that point I've noticed that something has to shift, right? The expectation is different. It's no longer the how high I need to jump, but oh, now the expectation of me is to lead. Clearly remember that moment, and it's not like it shifted immediately, but definitely I noticed it needed to.
Hmm.
Did you actually have a moment like this when you've noticed that, oh, now it's my job to actually, delegate, for instance?
I think I'd probably use a slightly different example. So
Mm.
I think I probably need to caveat between, this with I was raised and educated in an independent girls' school,
All
which is
right.
really competitive. So part of that shaping can have you kind of really focus on achievement and individual contribution. And, and yeah, I'm not actually, I don't, like, I'm driven, but I'm not that competitive. I'm competitive with myself, but not necessarily with others. Um, so I think I have a natural, like, I want to be part of a team, or I want, if I'm leading, um, I want us to be in the togetherness of it. Um, so I think probably the clearest example for me would actually be when I'm co-leading, um, and delivering with somebody else a program or a something. Um, and I think that's when I've come up against probably most of my edges in leadership, because you've got a group of people, a delegates or
Mm-hmm.
whatever, all looking at you, but they're looking at both of you. They're looking at you as an entity. And so for me, that's kind of like the side by side leadership. I think that's probably where I've learned most of my lessons. Because sometimes, your co-lead might say something, you think, why the hell are you saying that? Like, where are you going now? And, having to learn to drop, like, and just go with, so kind of like break and go with someone and be in the dance.
Hmm.
And then, so I kind of think of leadership as more um, leading with and leading, from the front, side, and back. It's not necessarily, you know, I'm the leader, I'm therefore going to delegate. And so my examples, I think when I've kind of found it most challenging is when, you're a pair and people see you as one,
Hmm.
but you've got all your individual kind of stuff coming up.
Yeah.
And I think that's when I've probably really had to let go of my ego the most and kind of go, shit, it's not about you, Vanessa. Like it's what's needed for the group. Um, so I don't know if it answers your question, but I think it's probably the most challenging one that I've faced.
Well, it's not that the answer is important in this case. It's actually the other question that popped into my mind and another area of exploration that I think what you've just said unraveled for me. And what I and this is by no means any form of judgment or discernment. It's just an abstract position because I have met quite a few people that, like us, work with leaders that would say that there needs to be a clear on-off moment. What do I mean by that? Well, there needs to be someone that the buck stops with them. There needs to
Mm,
be a position of accountability. And a leader, if they are to be one, if they, think about themselves as a leader, needs to embrace it. So people can see that, this is a person that will take the responsibility. This is the person that's comfortable with this role. And this is, however, we define the style of leadership, we know that in this situation, this is the person that has the accountability, is not doesn't want to shy away from this. Some people even would say that all ways and formats of diluting it are actually maybe escaping the truth that an ultimate, let's say, leader or someone that will be there comfortable with taking the responsibility, well, whether they're comfortable or not is a different matter, needs to be there. And any other arrangements are just possibly deflecting the necessary truth of the ultimate leader having to exist. Now, I'm wondering what you think in terms of embracing this identity. I know that it's probably something that you wouldn't normally do, or, people you work with possibly not. But the question is, there's this point of view.
yeah, and so I noticed that I've got some resistance to the point of view, and because I suppose I believe that we've all got leadership, and
Hmm.
we've come up against this a number of times in our conversations. But I like the word accountability. I dislike more responsibility when you're
Yes.
talking with leadership, because I feel like, okay, a leader is holding all the individuals within the team and the team accountable for what they say they're going to deliver on. And I think that's right. And I also do agree that there are many instances where I see, sometimes new leaders who kind of want to do this consensus thing, and then they can't find consensus, so they kind of do things by stealth. like and then it just creates more problems
Yeah.
because we're trying to be all things to all people, and it's just shit, really. So I do like the idea that a leader is clear in their integrity and their direction and their, what we're trying to achieve here, and da da da. um but I feel that their role is to hold accountability and to make sure that everyone is clear on their team accountabilities, not just individual accountabilities, but team accountabilities, and that they're all held, equally responsible for those things. Now, I think that's a radical statement to make, because in most of the places I've worked, it's been individual accountability, not team accountability. So, I think where I'm at in my kind of journey is, if I'm working with a team, I'm much more curious about, how do you, team, hold yourself accountable to the agreements that you make, versus doing what so many teams do, which is then kind of having a bit of a bun fight and a bit of a toxicity around.
Hmm.
Well, so and so didn't do that, and that one's the problem child or whatever.
Yeah.
So I feel the leader is the person that is holding that dynamic and that accountability, having clarity about, here's the direction of travel and here's the pace of travel, and doing the things that are necessary to kind of push from behind, or coach from the side, or lead from the front. But that to me is, they're enough removed to be able to be looking at all those aspects, and knowing which threads to pull,
Hmm.
and how to keep taking team lens, which I actually think is quite a rare skill set in a lot of leaders, if I'm being really blunt.
It absolutely is. And you're right. I'm also an advocate of the team being able to have the accountability. But the question there is, Vanessa, if we're working with organizations, we're working with senior leaders, and we are to promote this kind of leadership located in a team, and we both believe in the third entity, that the team itself is a being. How do we suggest leaders to see that the team is able to take in this particular job of leadership? How do we help leaders to, trust the team, to know that it's going to handle it?
Well, I think trust always starts with
Mm.
that leader, isn't it? So, what are my issues as a leader about letting go, about trusting in, a team's innate capacity, about being willing to let the team screw up and learn from their mistakes, what do I feel around that? I think that's part of the equation. But I think it's also being willing to have the conversations about, hey, I'm the leader, and these are the things that I'm going to be observing, watching, feeding back, talking
Hmm.
about, not just talking about, where are we with that outcome? Do you know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
how often are leaders really talking about here's what I see us doing together. Here, I think we often talk about, here's what we're doing and where we're not where we should be. But I still don't think we talk enough about, and here's how we're doing it. And this is where our energy is leaking. This is where we're tying ourselves in knots. This is where we're playing games. This is where we're avoiding emotional honesty. I just don't think we really do that very much. And I'll give you so if I think about
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
dynamic with my girls as a family dynamic, you might say, okay, I'm the matriarch. I hate that word, but do you know what I mean? I'm potentially a leader, but we've now transitioned where they are all adults. They're all
Hmm.
over 20, both of them are over 20, so they're adults. So they are resourceful and capable, and we've all got different experiences. I see a pattern of behavior that has come through my family lineage around, um, not always speaking directly,
Hmm.
and then enrolling people into a drama. And I really hate it. I hate that part of me that does it when I'm feeling overwhelmed by an emotion, and I kind of go, oh, God, I can't say it to that person. So I'm going to go and just tell my daughter, like, God, so and so was so unreasonable. Right. And so I've taught them, my ex has taught them in this, my mum's taught, do you know what I mean? Like, we've all
Yeah.
been ingrained in it. And I'm really trying hard to change that, because I realize how toxic it is, and how it doesn't help us. Now, I can't change them, but I can have an open conversation, which I've had, which is, I see this in me. I've I've created some of this. I'm responsible, and I'm doing my best to change it. And here's how I'm changing it. These are the things that I am, So I'm teaching my nervous system that when it feels discomfort, that doesn't mean it has to freeze and just suck it up when someone says something to me. It means I can feel the discomfort and actually use my language. And here's an example, of a sentence that I would use that would say, ouch, when you said that, it had this impact. I know you didn't mean it. Can we talk about that?
Mm.
Rather than, oh, yeah, thanks. And then, what a, da, 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 dee,
All
to,
right, I
do
get,
you know
yeah,
what I mean? So,
can be
so
quite,
I
yeah.
feel like I'm living this in my life. And then it is mirrored to me in the teams that I might coach or work with, or the individuals that I'd work with, where they show up and they go, oh, I'm so triggered. This person on the team did da 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 da, And so I see this everywhere in our culture right now of this, actually, are we talking about, what's my part? What are the behaviors that we do that are really not helping us drive the outcome that we want? And how are we going to do this whilst knowing that actually I can't control whether you step into that arena or not, but I am going to hold myself accountable for this. And I feel leaders, I would love to invite them into that conversation more where they say, okay, here are my edges. Here's where I'm going to go when I'm under pressure. And have that conversation in the team, so that we can all kind of let the guards down a little bit and stop faking it quite so much.
And it's, there's so many threads, obviously, but I guess it's a bigger conversation, possibly for another episode, but it links to something I wanted to move on to, which is, let's imagine a situation where, a leader is conscious enough, it's also on a senior level, and understand their own position and their own attitude towards leadership. But it's their job to plan succession, and it's their job to help mentor and maybe even coach an up and coming leader, someone that have just stepped in. And as you say, many people, and I've experienced it too, feel this edge, this itch when it comes to these words we've said, like accountability, like, taking this, making acts of leadership, taking actions like this, right? Whatever it means for whomever and whatever culture, it's difficult for people, yet, they accept it or they are on this path and they need some help. And
Yeah.
I remember, being in this situation, helping people that were up and coming and working with them to understand what is it that's their barrier. And obviously coaching really helps, and we're both professional coaches. But I'm wondering, from your point of view, you've got, a leader, a senior leader that we might be working with. What would we suggest? How would we help them prepare to help others to climb over this edge?
Yeah, I think so. I think the thing that always really helped me was really early in my coaching training when we talked about how do we hold accountability with a client that also holds self-respect, that
Hmm.
doesn't kind of hold judgment. And I just always remember, learning that thing of, okay, so what is it that you are committing to? You know, how up for this are you really? Okay, great. How will I know that you've done it? How are we going to agree to check in? And then I think probably the most important thing is when we check in that we don't come in this kind of parent-child so did you do it? And why not? If you do, and so we don't use judgment there, but we use curiosity, like, oh wow, okay, that's interesting.
Hmm.
If you learned something through that, what's next then? So I feel that is a skill that leaders can have, um, but it requires a kind of meta skill of curiosity for them to do it really well, and openness. Like, it is not about, did you do it? And if you didn't, why not? It's kind of like, oh, help me understand. You said you were going to do this and then you didn't follow through. What might have gone on? Okay, is there some learning? What would you do differently next time?
Mm. In my example, what I found works best is when a leader is not afraid to show vulnerability, the senior leader, and maybe tell a story their own story of how difficult it was for them, and because it is difficult for everyone. If you're a leader, you've been through this journey in one shape or another, and I think saying that everyone feels uncomfortable with it because of how we were raised, how our culture works. Making this transition is always a difficult one. There's this, whatever you want to call it, coming of age, metamorphosis. We need to acknowledge that something has changed. Now, the real question, and I'm a proponent of it, is really confirming and asking, do you want to stay on this journey? Is this the
Yeah.
journey that you want to continue with, right? And it's with care, non-judgment, saying, look, right, if you want to continue with it, I shall help you.
Mm.
The
Do you
real
know,
challenge is someone trying to continue without the
yeah.
actual.
Well, it's really interesting because you're making me think about when do I get frustrated
Hmm.
in situations where I'm led, and one of those situations can be where I feel like I give input and I've got great ideas, or oh, here's what's possible, and then you get the no, we're going to do it like this. Because I can often feel that like, oh, okay, because there's a part of me that will then go, okay, yeah, it's not my business, it's someone else's business. Don't get your knickers in a twist about it, Vanessa. Let go. And I can kind of feel passive in my own leadership in that situation. And I feel like there is an honesty conversation that can happen between leaders and their teams that says, here's where I'm going to make a call, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and here's how I'm going to signal that this is my call and this is the direction of travel. And I'm going to be clear when I want and I'm inviting, ideas. And sometimes I feel like because that structure's not there or that clarity isn't there, and I felt this quite a lot in the places that I've worked where, oh, we really want great ideas, we really want innovation, but like, nah, not really. and it brings out a reactive part of me that is a bit passive, and that just kind of goes, okay, well, fine. You go, okay, knock yourself out then. Which sounds really sarcastic, doesn't it? So for me, kind of building on what you're saying is I feel if leaders can talk about how we do, how I want things to go, when I'm open to, exploration, when actually I'm going to make a call, and here's how I'm going to signal that I'm just going to make that call. I think it's really helpful to be transparent and open like that, and that is exactly what you're talking about. To me, I think that's maybe vulnerable too, because I might make a call and it's the wrong call, but
Yeah.
hey, we're all going to align around it and we're going to learn from it and grow from it. I'm not saying just because I make that call that it's always going to be right, because I'm human too as a leader.
Do you know what I find interesting, as possibly as we're drawing to a close of this episode, is the more I'm thinking about it, and working with leaders and putting out a lot of stuff, including this podcast, around the difficult journey and life of this particular identity. We have worked together as humans for thousands and thousands of years, and yet it seems like it's a problem that we're constantly trying to solve. There's constantly
Yeah.
new views and new philosophies, even though, there's changes in the world of work, but fundamentally, it has been quite similar for ages. Yet, this prompts me to think that maybe it's not something that will or can even be solved. Maybe it's something that needs to be a journey. Maybe it's something that you need to discover your own through trial and error, through failing and succeeding, through looking inside and outside to see what leadership really is. And maybe that's the journey how it has to be.
Yeah. And I think what you're inviting people to do is to say, and you can be open, around that. You can share with people where you are in your journey, or what you're focusing on or what you're aware of, because actually that brings people with you,
Mm.
rather than having to be this, I'm the leader out front and I've got to be bulletproof, and do you know what I mean, and
Yeah.
armored up. I think that what we're talking about here is extending the invitation that we kind of design, we work and we grow and we evolve together.
We do. And a part of this evolution is obviously working with coaches and possibly searching, as I said, outside, which is on podcasts like this. So thank you for finding this podcast, and we hope you've enjoyed this episode. And as always, we invite you to subscribe, and we'll have one in 2 weeks. So hopefully you'll stay with us longer.